I thought I will give a talk about how I ended up to walk this path. It's not all details included there, but since I haven't pre-planned what I'm going to say, as usual, but I thought perhaps it could be a little bit of inspiration, but also kind of not really warnings, but something that is not necessarily necessary, or maybe some things, yes, let's say, kind of warnings also. And so I will just say what comes to my mind, but some details here and there along the way. So it's kind of it's about this person sitting here now. This talk is kind of something to do with that, but I hope that doesn't matter. So yes, and also kind of choosing this subject, I thought, because there's so many stories, everybody could tell story how you came here, and they all are, of course, equally unique. And also, it's not that we are comparing one's details here, but maybe it's okay to give one example. So I remember that as a child we, and I believe it is same with all of us, most children at least, have a lot of common in that they can ask questions, like many kind of questions. What do we have for dinner? And do I get this thing as a Christmas present or not? Those questions are still existing today when we grow up. But those questions that children are usually asking are more of those that disappears along the way. When we grow older, we skip those stupid questions, or that's how we have thought, yes. So I was very talkative a child, very much so. I actually talked so quickly that nobody could follow what I was telling. And that's why my parents once, they wanted to prove that, and they recorded. It was after some Charles Chaplin movie that I wanted to share. And yes, it was true. It was very hard even for me to follow this storyline. It went here and there, and yeah, so I'm still recording this. Maybe some childhood trauma. And yes, I was talkative, and I like to ask also about death, life and death, especially death. I can't really remember how how I felt then, what was this death that I was so interested in. It was obviously the real death, but I can't remember this, like emotionally how it felt then. But I followed my father and mother also sometimes, walking behind them and asking again and again about death. And one thing I'm thankful for them is that they really let me speak. Maybe they couldn't follow what I said, but they let me speak. And they let me ask. I heard afterwards that they were frustrated sometimes, but luckily my father he's still a little bit like that, but he used to be very interested in about himself, those questions. So we had something in common. And although we were like a Christian family, like a middle class Christian family, meaning that we every night they came next to my bed and we say together this evening pray, for example. But we weren't really like that, religious otherwise. But there was this evening pray, and then was pray. Yeah. And then sometimes church, but not often. Mainly Christmas with grandmother and so. But my father has studied theology and worked with on the field also a little bit. So, and that was for him, this studying theology was and in 60s was only way to study religion, I guess. At that time it wasn't possible even, I guess, this religion, science of religion or comparative something like studies. Perhaps he would have chosen that, but he had his own childhood and when he was young, churching for the truth. And actually, maybe I'm telling about my father's life. This is part 1. Not much, but because these are interesting details, at least I believe so, that these has affected. So I don't know if he likes if I'm telling this, but anyway, he had a little bit of this period in his life when he read Bible, but not like just like intellectually reading, but he tried to somehow find some solution, some answer, some deeper connection or some kind of truth. And he did also, I guess, some kind of praying and was very intensively working. Like I don't know how long, but let's say a few months or at least. We never have talked much about this, and I actually would like to know more, but somehow it never happens that we can talk about it. And then he came to this solution that things starts to happen. So he started to feel peace and calm and kind of being protected and sounded like many kind of good qualities. But he himself felt that it was not true really. It was kind of hypnotizing oneself or kind of wanting to believe or wanting to have certain kind of experience, and then those things starts to kind of emerge. And I don't know what is what, but something like that was his experience, and because he felt that it was not real, but it was somehow self-sustained, you get the point. He kind of did it himself, although maybe it was unconscious somehow. So kind of he left it behind. He wanted to more scientific or more real evidences or something. And I haven't heard him telling this, what I'm now sharing with you. Maybe once we talked about it. And I try to ask a few more questions, like very politely, of course, because I'm doing this. So I thought it would be interesting. But somehow because it was for him so clear that it was just the individual subjective experience and not really doing anything with some universal or real stuff. And maybe it was so really, but then I remember that I kind of wanted to know more about this, and then I was suggesting that maybe if you could have like a continue, it would be interesting to know what then. But this saying this means that I kind of got kind of a nice background with my father to go through these kind of things when I was very young, when I was a child. And one thing I'm thankful is that he didn't give any answer. He didn't give any answer. He could have done that easily, but he didn't, and he respected my own searching that I am kind of asking and looking for around this solution. And we talked about some, but he never gave any answer. That son, you should believe like this, and this is the truth, and so. And that's actually what I have done with my children. That's maybe why they flew away around the world and now they live in Australia. But I should have told them that Finland is the best place to live. But yes, so it's a risk, of course, if parents doesn't. I mean, sometimes maybe it's good to give some like this is the direction you should go, my child, that you don't pick up the wrong way. And yes, of course, nowadays I have talked with my both children, and of course they know what I'm doing. And sometimes they are a little bit of interested in, and who knows, maybe one day they really try some meditation more consciously. But okay, that's about that. So one thing was this questioning, and the other thing was that I wasn't told stop do that, because that's what happens often. You are ridiculed. They are laughing at you, or trying to convince you that it's stupid to ask too big questions. And my question was, after all, it was I forgot to check how to say it in English. It was something like that. How does it feel, or how would it be? How would I feel? Yes, something like that. How would I feel if I would not have been born? Something like that. But I didn't ask that question probably from them. But it was about death. I was asking about death. And as a child, children are interested in death. Most of children are at some point. It's quite, if your grandmother dies or if your pet or who knows, maybe sister or father or mother or some close. Of course, it's a big mystery, and as a little child, you don't have any. You can't really. You don't have that protection so strong that. I mean, you are just openly in wonder. What is this death that will come one time soon and will wipe you away? Of course, it's a big question. It's a tremendous question still for people, I mean, even older people. But for some reason I ended up to ask this question I just told you, and that was my private question. I didn't share it with anyone, but it was like it included this question: if I would have been born, if I wouldn't be here at all. It also included everything. It's kind of started about if this would not have happened, meaning also that no planets, no stars, no animals, no feelings, no thoughts, no, and I just picked it up next thing, and I included it with this question, and it kind of went through basically everything I could imagine, and it was put there: if this would not have happened, what about then? How would I feel then? And it was very interesting question, I thought and felt, because that was why I did ask. I didn't ask because I didn't know back then, but I asked because it felt so true to ask in my body. So it wasn't in my head, this question. I didn't know then that where it was, but it was whole being, whole body. Totally whole body was asking. Because I was so interested in then that no, but you know what I mean. So because it wasn't intellectual interest only, not at all actually. It was coming from the different source, this question. But it wasn't depressed. It was like wasn't sad question. I wasn't sad or depressed about coming death, or that I don't know why these things are here and what it would be if nothing would have happened ever. So it wasn't depressed feeling. It was very like I don't know right word. Wholesome, maybe. It was like exciting little bit, yeah. But it was like a lifting up or kind of enlightening in kind of yeah. And now, if like a retrospective thinking, it was quite fun that there was this question that I didn't share with anyone, and it worked still. It was my hobby. It was my daily hobby. Usually evenings before I went to sleep, I was already lying on my bed, and then I asked. I was lying there and staring at this wallpaper, and asking. Wallpaper was just white, and there were some green 1.5 millimeter diameter green spots, dots like asymmetrically, those dots. Not very fancy actually, not so I wouldn't choose it now. But this wallpaper was there, and I was staring that wallpaper. And of course, if you are staring something like without using your eyes or moving your eyes because you are concentrated something else, this optical, I mean, when your eyes relaxes, you are not focusing them, then happens this, that happens with those 3D magical pictures, because your eyes are relaxed and you move this kind of a mess of dots, different colors and so, and then you move it and you see suddenly this 3D picture there, an elephant or rose or just a ball, or that's actually a quite interesting subject too, those magical pictures. There is something I think it's a kind of a nice metaphor, how we first see flat, there's nothing alive, it's just a flat mixture of different colors, and then if it suddenly opens up in 3D, and there is really something like vivid and alive, then it's quite different. They both are there simultaneously on the paper. Both are there all the time. There's nothing has changed. Only what has changed is the way I look. And so when I was looking this wallpaper, those dots kind of became 3D. So the wall was kind of, there was a depth like it was suddenly quite deep, this wall. It wasn't flat. And that was also kind of felt good to see that space, although I can't kind of see it, but it's kind of there still. You feel it, that it's kind of going deep. And so this was I can't remember exactly, but I would like quite safely say that it was my daily routine or evening routine to do that. And my guess is that I started doing this like before school age, like before age 7 or something like that. Maybe it was 6 or 5 or anyway. And of course I was pretty innocent. I didn't know anything about asking big questions or so. It was just habit, because as I told you, it felt great. Sometimes I had those goosebumps. Maybe every day, I don't remember. But it was very often those goosebumps because it was so funny. How can I ask even this question? Just, yeah. And years went by. I did something else also daytime, not only this. And as I told, I didn't tell anyone. I would bet that my friends wouldn't be that interested in. But if we put together all these things, it is kind of that. As I said, I kind of feel now lucky that I could continue this asking, because I wasn't told not to ask. And okay, then, and okay, a little sidetrack maybe. that might have something to do, but I felt a little interest in at some point of this Asian. We had some yoga book, for example, and there were some poems or kind of this kind of not very Finnish stylish stories. I mean, there were some yoga poems that were talking about non-dualism and these kind of things. One big something and ocean, and so those things were quite exciting. And I felt that there is something, and I know perhaps all of you could tell your own version about exactly the same things. And also some paintings and such felt interesting. It's kind of that comes from Japan or maybe China or. But then what happens of course when we are also grown up, and along the way we change, and we, for different reasons, we lose this ability to, or interest simply. We lose interest. Other things comes first. And of course when you reach this age, then when your teenage years are beginning and your hormones are new thing for you and things starts to happen, then I lost this question. I completely dropped it. I completely forgot it. But at the same time I got interested in, at some point in 15 I was around that, like a Zen, I saw some Zen books, and in Finnish we had at that time maybe 2 or 1 that had something to do with Zen. And I can't remember why I was interested in at the first place, but it was something about those short poems, Zen poems, and likewise that felt quite funny. One book was this Alan Watts, what is about Zen, I don't remember the name, but it was this Alan Watts book that, like afterwards, some people have told, or not criticized, but this book has been picked it up a few times when Zen people are talking about Zen practice, and then they say that this Alan Watts, he does not mention in his book, which is quite thick, he doesn't mention a word Zazen at all, like 0 times. And so it's a bit more leaning towards this theoretical, or like it was in 60s, Rinzai Zen was the sect, Zen sect that came to the West first, or at least it took the major attention reached. And since Rinzai Zen is dealing with koans, which are literal texts, as we know, those were things that were attracting university students and people interested in Asian cultures and philosophies, and Zen was, of course, had those years in 60s when freedom was really, this new generation was coming out, hippies as we call them now. When they were coming and they find out that there is this Zen, it was really something they liked to do. But there was those university students then, of course, and they went to lectures, like D.D. Suzuki came to the United States, and they were talking about koans and those stories and satori and enlightenment and kensho and so, of course, people were interested in. But the actual sasen practice never mentioned, very randomly, I mean seldomly. But of course, few groups starts to emerge where they actually did some meditation, and I'm sure Alan Watts himself, he did something at some point. But in his book, he doesn't mention it. So I didn't know about anything about Sasen, but I know about those poems and these experiences that they possibly are. I don't know if I was really interested in those experiences, but all in all, those ink paintings and poems was quite enough. They were quite enough. And there was one other book, was Holy Turtle. What is it in English? I don't really know how it's in English, but let's say Holy Turtle Dragging Its Tail. Something like that. Pyhä kilpikona laahaa häntäänsä. Very thin booklet, filled with kind of koan stories and like old stories from Japan and Zen, definitely. Those two books I went through. And these kind of little details, I'm not really wanting, I'm just telling these things, so don't bother to listen too carefully. But like retrospective, it's funny to think that I used to, when I went to swimming hall, which I love to do then I put often my legs in full lotus and I sank to the bottom, I mean when I was child, to the bottom of the swimming pool, and I kind of did some kind of yogi thing there. But it was of course playing, but I tried to stay there as long as I could and like I took all air out, so then you can sing, and I was sitting full lotus and I boom. But then maybe next chapter. So yeah, I forgot to ask this question, and I definitely didn't practice any meditation. I think so. I was going around and being not so good student in school. But then, when was it? Ah, yes. Then I, after a few episodes of being in theater and playing music and writing poems and such, I quit anyway school, high school, lukio. I quit that and went to another city, Tampere, where I was. That's another story, strange story, but I was working as a sort of an actor 1 year in Tampere theater. No big roles for me, but not only 3 in the background. I had a little bit more of. I had a few lines here and there, but that was a winter that was colder than this one. It was really cold winter, and I lived alone in my. Maybe one reason I moved there was that my grandmother had died and this house was empty. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly. Yes, actually it was around that time. So there was empty house and was located in Kangasala, like quite close to Tampere, and it was very cold winter. And -30 was sometimes, and it was cold house also because it was 10 degrees inside sometimes. But I had a lot of free time. Since theater, I was in 2 place, like a working. And after those rehearsals we done, and when was premiere and all those, then was of course only those actual shows, or how you say, theater plays. And they were of course evenings and not every day at all, but here and there. So I had a lot of free time. And I spent it in this house, and like by accident, just being there alone, kind of notion, or how you say, became more sensitive, or kind of calming down. Mind was kind of becoming more, kind of being here and now was coming more evident. So there was this somebody in this cold house, alone, walking around. And I became more aware of this body. And suddenly there was this question, who the heck is this guy? Okay, this is the end of part 1. And we have to, or you don't have very much choice, but I will continue this tomorrow. Okay, may all beings attain the Buddha way.